In the last video, I said we were all done with the shape tweening and ready to move on, but that's not quite true. I knew there was something that was bothering me about the motion of the worm, and in between making videos, I've discovered what it was. If you watch the worm right there, it goes from there to there, which even for a smiley inchworm is very unrealistic. So what we need to do is give that more of a gradual fall. And if we were frame by frame animating and we had done all this work, that would be a problem. But it's so easy when you work with symbols. All we have to do is go into the symbol, analyze it, and fix it. So we're going to go into our library, bring up the inchworm, double click. And so what we're missing is, instead of going right from there and cycling back to the beginning and falling down, that inchworm needs to go down a little smoother. So super easy fix is we're just going to copy these two states here. I just did a click and a shift click to select both of them. I'm going to hold down Option and drag out to say about here, because he would go down quicker than he comes up. Slide across here and put in, oh, actually I need to do these individually because this one is a classic tween, the face, and this one is a shape tween. Alright, and if you scrub the playhead, much better. I'm going to click here to go back to the main timeline, and when we scrub our playhead we can see that the worm looks a lot better. Now, I've been emphasizing that it's very important for you to keep experimenting when you learn these new topics. And I'm going to really plead with you, if you want to be good at this, you should really try to wrap your mind around these animated symbols. I'm going to show you a few things here that will help. But the reason that I'm emphasizing this is our last topic is movie clips. And movie clips are indeed an animated symbol, but there's something a little bit different about them. And it's going to be very difficult to understand movie clips if you don't have a firm understanding of just a basic animated symbol. So let me tell you a couple of the key things that you want to make sure you wrap your mind around. One is that the timeline on the animated symbol and the timeline inside of our actual animation are very much linked together. So if I scrub my playhead, what's happening here is the exact same thing that is happening inside of the animated symbol. And when this worm comes back around onto the ground, this is where that animated symbol starts over. Hopefully make that a little clearer. I'm going to do something that I don't recommend that you do. But what I'm going to do is add a second where the inchworm just stays there before it starts doing its thing, and a second for the L. So basically, what I should be able to do here is just move this guy forward about a second, and then slide across both of these, and then add in a second with the F5s. Okay, so this one is going to be pretty easy, and by this one I mean the L. So all I have to do is click on this frame, hold down the Option key, drag back about a second. Now it automatically put a tween in there, which we don't need because it's not actually doing anything, so I'm going to remove it. But you can see the L shows up, and then not until here does it start to move and do its tween. So you might think, well, that's going to be about the same for the worm, which I'll just move this back right now because it started earlier. Okay, so if we want that worm to sit still for about a second before it moves, you might think, well, let's just copy this same way we did. Bring it back. Get rid of the tween that it placed in there. And now, when I scrub the playhead, oh, the worm's not sitting still, right? Because This is an animated symbol. It has its own timeline that lives inside the library. So as long as it has a space to exist, it's going to start moving. And we even get a little bit of awkwardness here, saying that we wanted that before it started moving, just to move in place. We would need to coordinate this end frame with this beginning frame and give the worm like one complete cycle before that happened. But since that's not what we're after, we won't worry about that. So the problem is I need the worm to be just a symbol, not a symbol that's animated. How do I do that? Well, an easy way is probably going to be just to make a copy of what we already have in the library. So we'll find that worm. We will click, and then I'll right click on it. I'll select duplicate, and maybe I'll just add the word static to the end of this. Click OK. We'll go inside of the symbol here by double clicking on it, and we're just going to get rid of everything but the very first frame. So a shift F5. We could get rid of those tweens in there if we wanted, but since I'm just going to delete all this anyway, it doesn't really matter. Come back to the main timeline, and now all we should have to do is replace this symbol with the other symbol. And there's luckily for us a real easy way to do that. We don't even have to delete it and put the new one in. And we can keep the same exact positioning. So what we do is we just come up here to Properties, make sure that this guy is selected, and click on Object. And it tells us that it's a graphic, which we already knew. It's an instance of iWorm, but we want it to be an instance of iWorm static. So there's this little icon here for swapping symbols. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to select iWorm static, going to click OK, and now we solved that problem. And now let's imagine for a second, and again, I'm not even going to do this, but I just want to talk it through with you. Just think if at the end we wanted the worm to stay still for 1 second. What kind of problems are we going to run into? Well, what we'd have to make sure happens is that the worm comes to a complete stop before we go into it. So we'd have to go to right there. That's where we'd have to put our F7 and then bring out a static instance. So again, the key thing that you really got to wrap your head around is that we not only have a timeline in our animation, but we can add timelines to symbols. And perfect example is right here. We have a timeline with 2 different layers. Now, just to kind of give you a premise of why I'm trying to explain this and hopefully get you to wrap your mind around it, is later on, towards the end of this project, you're going to see things like this, that even though the animation is stopped, this is still moving. So that's pretty interesting. Another way to look at that is right now, if we were to throw a stop in this animation, right here, say frame 492, and we play it, it would get to this point and it would stop. It would freeze. Everything would stop, including the worm. But if that worm were a movie clip, which we're going to learn about soon, that worm would keep moving just like that little person did at the preview of my animation. Okay, so now to get us back to where we're all at the same place, I'm going to go in here and I am going to, oops, why is revert not an option? Oh, because I'm on the wrong file. Phew. Okay, file, revert. Yes, I'm sure. And we should be back at the place where we fixed the worm and we are ready for the next section. Let's take care of a quiz question. Okay, so we said that shape tweening uses more computer resources than classic tweening. So classic tweening is always our first choice, but shape tweening is definitely an option. and it's probably a little bit more friendly on resources than doing a whole ton of frame by frame animation. But another object that uses up a lot of computer resources and may cause problems is overusing gradients. So if you're a big Illustrator fan and you like to make stuff in Illustrator with a lot of gradients to make it more realistic, just know that that will probably get you into trouble if you have too much of it going on inside of Adobe Animate. I had one student who did their final project and they had gradients on everything, which can be a bit too much just visually anyway, but it got to the point where when she did Command Return, it would take about 30 to 45 seconds for the program just to render the preview. So limit yourself there. You know, you could have a little bit on your background. If you have a sun and you want it to look more little realistic, you could do that. But the problem is that all programs really have to treat a gradient almost like it's a photograph, because there are so many different things going on to make that gradient look like it does. And similarly, you do not want to use bitmap images, which a bitmap just means, basically you could think of it like pixels. So don't use a pixel-based image such as a JPEG or a PNG or a Photoshop document or a GIF. Now you can use them, but you use them sparingly. In fact, we're using one here for our UFO scene. But you also have to ask yourself, do I want to mix photographs and animations? Sometimes it's kind of interesting if, let's say, for example, the background's a photograph and then the animation is vector, but too much mixing can look just really weird and unprofessional. Okay, and just to let you know, I have done projects in Adobe Animate where I've had maybe 80 photographs and it worked, but the key thing was they were pretty low res. They were maybe 800 pixels wide by 600 pixels tall. So just keep that in mind. Don't overdo either one of these things, gradients or bitmap images. And because we just talked about it, let's answer this question too. An animated graphic symbol is timeline. The answer is dependent, that it animates along with the main timeline, as you've just seen. For our next section, I went ahead and created a new document, just like we've been doing, called it Pan and Zoom. And then I went to the folder that we downloaded our assets earlier into, and I want to go ahead and open up the midterm.ai file. Now, even if you've never used Illustrator before, you really don't have to know much to do this. I'll give you every step that you need to get you there. But a lot of people are familiar with Illustrator and want to know more about how they can integrate what they draw in Illustrator with Animate. And it's really quite easy. The basic recommendation I have, until you're doing a whole bunch of it, in which you might want to investigate automated means of bringing things in, and more, what's the word I'm trying to think of, just more friendly ways of bringing things in. But the most basic way is just a simple copy and paste. So now that we have this document opened up in Illustrator, I'm just going to simply, with the Illustrator tools, grab the very familiar looking selection tool, and I just want to click on this large object here. And you can see if I click and drag, it moves just like stuff does inside of Animate. But all I really need to do is get a selection of it, and then I'm going to edit copy. I'm going to go into my new document in in Animate, and I'll go ahead and I'll click on my first frame in there, and I will do an edit, paste. Let's try paste in center. Really doesn't matter. Now, okay, so this is going to open up. We do not want to check this first one because that would be counterintuitive. That would change those nice vector graphics into an image and take up a lot more memory. You definitely don't want that. Depending on what you're doing, you probably don't want layers maintained, because it could end up making additional layers for you here. Generally, when you copy and paste something from Illustrator into Animate, you're just going to paste it in here and probably turn it into a symbol, or maybe on a rare occasion break it apart down into a shape. We click on OK, brings it in, and you can see it is really big. So I'm going to command the minus down a bit so you can see just how big that is. Move it off the stage so that you can see the stage. And we're going to have trouble when we're working with this at this size seeing exactly where our stage is. Although in the newer versions, they've done this little thing where it's not so hard to find anymore. So actually, no, I was not aware of that. That's actually quite nice. So my old workaround for that was I would turn on rulers, and I'll just show you this because for something else down the road you may want to do. So you'd go to View, Rulers, and then I just drag guides out to all four corners of the stage, so that even when something was over the top of it, we could see it. But looks like we won't need those, so I'll go to View, Guides, and Clear Guides. And just to give me some more screen real estate, I will turn the rulers off as well. Okay, so if I look at my library, there should be nothing in there yet. And let's just go ahead and turn this into a symbol. And I'm going to name it BG, as in background, and you'll see why in a minute.